Welcome back to the Brass Facts channel. That's not the opener at all. Hey guys, Brass Facts here. This is the Vortex Defender CCW enclosed, and this is the Vortex Defender CCW enclosed ST. It's not at all a mouthful. That did not take me 4 tries. And together they represent a pretty compelling alternative to the Holosun EPS and EPS carry series, two very popular optics and probably the go-to options for an enclosed dot on a concealed carry handgun. However, there is one slight consideration when it comes to Vortex sights. Vortex has a really good, strong track record of making absolute garbage red dot sights. My first ever one was the Strikefire. Yeah, it's alright, but even at the time it had a pretty lackluster battery life and mediocre brightness levels. This is a modern Vortex Spark, which somehow is worse than the Strikefire despite coming out after the Strikefire, and now we have a refresh rate issue in addition to the battery issue. I also got an early Vortex Huey in a trade and then promptly sold it as it's just a similarly priced EOTech with a blue tint, and you guessed it, a refresh rate issue. And the rest of the lineup apparently suffers from similar issues. Lower than average battery life, lower than average brightness, higher than average refresh rate issues. Well, actually, it's lower than average because the refresh, whatever, you get it. However, I've heard relatively promised things about the newest line of enclosed dots, so I anteed up, bought them, the enclosed ST and the CCW, so let's see if Vortex finally cracked the code.
So, fun fact, you guys have probably already noticed that Hop has already done a video on the Vortex Defender fairly recently. And we actually do talk between failed rounds and marathon about, what videos we're working on. However, I don't know if it's our lack of respect of Vortex red dot sights, but yeah, we never talked about the fact that we were working on that video. And I was considering just shit canning this video, but I figured for once it might be interesting to release an identical video, right? Both are just reviews and you can kind of compare and contrast.
Quick point of clarity on the nomenclature here. Vortex also has other options in the Defender series, also called the ST and CCW. Those are the open minute designs, and they both suck. Only the enclosed series of the Defender line are the newer designs and what we're looking at today. Also, if you're looking to buy these despite the name, CCW is the standard size. The standard, or ST, is the large size dots. So the exact opposite of how everyone else in the industry names their stuff. It just had to be unique there, Vortex, huh? The first thing you'll notice when you check out one of these is why does it have a meat tenderizer front end? Rapidly followed by that price tag. Outside of Huey, these are Vortex's most expensive red dots to date at $300 and $380 respectively. So these are not just competing on use case, but Vortex is willing to offer these up as peer priced options to the Holosun EPS series. So right at the get-go, that's a really strong statement. These can't just be a step up from their previous offerings. They actually need to compete with the king. So, well, how are they? In many ways, exactly the same. We got our port side buttons, solar panel on the top that's quite frankly useless because you should run these in manual adjust mode only. At least the solar panel looks cool with their logo, I guess, right? They get sufficiently bright for, oh my god, why did the Mormons colonize a desert shithole Utah? You can program these to be in dot, circle dot, or just circle mode, though honestly, personal preference, right? I don't like how they do the circle dot. There is solid edge-to-edge visibility of the dot, no noticeable refresh rate. Hey, good job, finally Vortex, right? And the only small issue is that you can see the visible part of the emitter when you're 1 or 2 settings too high for what is appropriate. Battery life seems to be not just good, but with the usage of a CR2032 instead of the Micro 1620 of the EPS, I suspect the Defender enclosed will actually outpace the Holosun in terms of battery life, which is already pretty decent. And hey, quality of life. You can kind of just use whatever to get the battery compartment open, unlike the Holosun one, which will generally want you having the Holosun tool on you, except now there's 2 versions of the Holosun tool, so it doesn't even open up the battery compartment half the time. The only thing that might bug you is that the battery housing is a bit bulbous compared to the slim, almost like bezel-less design of the EPS and EPS carry. You guys know I'm a big button simp, and I really still like the RMRs a lot simply because they have those huge chungus buttons, and the Defenders are about as close as it gets with big ol' fuck-off buttons, which makes me very happy. There might be concerns about these being pressed while carrying, but I don't know, man. I've been carrying this for the last 3 months, G19 appendix, and I've been carrying an RMR for God knows how long. I don't think it matters as much as people think. But if it does to you, maybe the enclosed Venom, which has top-mounted buttons, is a better choice, but hold off on that for a second because I got some info on that. Image and clarity wise, we're a tinge better than an EPS. When you're doing a number 1, number 2, you can barely tell that there's a little less tint on the Vortex sights, but it's minor, it's quite minor. I'd say transmission is fine for night vision usage, but these only have 2 night vision settings, which is way too little. And on top of that, Vortex did the classic oopsie boopsie, where the boomer product manager thinks night vision settings means settings for vision at night and not settings for night vision. And they're barely usable in what I would call medium lighting conditions, and then when you go to dark lighting conditions, they're way too bright for night vision usage. Yeah, whatever. It's irrelevant for handgun usage most of the time, I think, but it does somewhat disqualify these if you wanted to put it, once again, on a rifle piggyback or a PDW roll. So the CCW, or the standard size one, mounts to the increasingly prolific RMSC 507K footprint, so same as the EPS and a number of other concealed carry handgun dot sizes. The larger ST uses the Delta Point Pro footprint. At first glance, I'm going to call this a downside. Very few things, unless you live in Europe, but who cares, it's Europe, uses the Delta Point Pro footprint, and it makes it somewhat limited on what you can actually mount this thing to. However, this also kind of makes it one of its greatest upsides. The market doesn't have very good Delta Point Pro footprints, and despite, once again, Delta Point Pro kind of sucking, there are certain things that are just stuck with that. For example, the Voodoo 4 to 12x or 3 to 9x. That requires Delta Point Pro because you need a unique mount to that. Alternatively, if you want to do some loopholed 35mm, I said loopholed, right? Are you guys proud of me? If you want to do some loopholed 35mm shenanigans, their mount is actually quite good, but it's loopholed, so of course it uses the Delta Point Pro footprint. And then, of course, most modern handguns have a adapter plate system that allows just whatever you want to be mounted, and here it'd be perfectly fine, obviously, or God forbid you got bamboozled in the early 2010s to cut your handgun for DDP, so yeah, that works too. I also lightly tested durability, and the ST and CCW took a drop test straight to the face, fared just fine. I shot the CCW for just shy of 2,000 rounds on a J19 all throughout training, match, and a trip across the US of A. And the ST had a quick ride on an RXM, and I finished it off with 250 shells of 12 gauge. Both held 0, no weird quirks, damage, issues, whatever, you get the deal, they're doing fine. Oh, I mentioned earlier that it might be tempting to get the Vortex Venom enclosed because they nixed the completely pointless solar panel, you save a bit of money, and the buttons are now mounted on top, which may be desirable. Maybe, I could see it, but my personal anecdote here is that my Venom SG, which is just a regular Venom fused into a shotgun mount, broke immediately on my 990 Aftershock as the buttons had slipped forward of the actual button part, so when you press on the buttons didn't do anything. Now, Luke's worked better, but it's something that is a little bit concerning. Take that personal anecdote and also consider that the Venom series is technically a lower grade or lower quality series than the Defender and other Vortex products. So, I'm not sure here yet, personally. So, what's the verdict here? On paper, the EPS is just a slightly better product. However, these differences are so minor or slight, and the EPS is such a high bar that I think the Vortex Defender is a pretty good option. In fact, it's such a good option that while in fact my general recommend will still remain the EPS and EPS carry, you may actually be swayed towards the enclosed Defender by some of the smaller changes it brings. Perhaps the roughly $50 discount over the Holosun alone is enough to have you go with the Vortex option. Perhaps you want a optic that uses the prolific 2032 watch battery instead of the sort of weird 1620 that the EPS does. Perhaps you prefer Vortex as a company. Maybe you're one of the 5 weirdos that needs the ST's Delta Point Pro footprint. Maybe the fact that Vortex sends you screws for every single handgun on the market gives you the warm and fuzzies on the inside. Perhaps you don't like the size of the smaller EPS and CCW and you want to go with a larger concealed carry style dot with the ST. Maybe you like the larger port side buttons. Shit, maybe the beat tenderizer alone is enough to push you towards Vortex. Really, the only thing that you should probably consider in this whole dynamic is these are relatively new optics with a company with a track record of some really bad optics, while the Holosun EPS and EPS carry, as well as many of the other options like the 507 comp and more, have a ton of track record behind them of being just solid options on the market. Alright, that's the show. Thanks for watching, fellas. See ya! Does this cost extra or does this give me a discount?
Discount for sure.